On this recording, I will be reading Romans 11 and beginning in verse 1 of chapter 11. I ask then, has God rejected his people? Absolutely not. For I too am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, from the tribe of Benjamin. Remember, Paul is writing, and we've talked about Israel rejecting the Messiah, Jesus. And so he's answering this question to say, has God rejected Israel? And he says, of course not. He says, I'm an Israelite. Paul is saying, I'm an Israelite. I descended from Abraham. And I'm in the tribe of Benjamin. In verse 2, God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. God hasn't rejected Israel. This has been his plan for all of eternity. God has not rejected his people. Or do you not know what the scripture says in the Elijah section? How he pleads with God against Israel. See, Elijah was pleading against Israel. Lord, they have killed your prophets, torn down your altars, and I am the only one left. And they are trying to take my life. Elijah wanted God to give up on Israel, his people, but he didn't. Chapter in verse 4. But what was God's reply to Elijah? I have left 7,000 men for myself who have not bowed down to Baal. So from that Old Testament in Elijah, God said, I had 7,000 men from me. They haven't bowed down to Baal. Verse 5, in the same way then, there is also at the present time, right now, a remnant chosen by grace. A remnant is a portion. It's a part. Something that is left. And so God is saying there's a remnant of Jews, of Israelites that have been chosen by my grace, undeserved. Now, if by grace, then it's not by works. Otherwise, grace ceases to be grace. He said, they didn't earn it. It's by grace. It's undeserved. It's not worked for. And he said, if they worked for it, then grace has no meaning. So he says, no, it's not by works. It's only grace. Verse 7, what then? Israel did not find what it was looking for, but the elect did find it. The rest were hardened, as it is written. I'll read what they said in a moment. So most of Israel didn't find what they were looking for in Jesus. He wasn't what they were looking for. They were looking for someone to come and lead right then and to overcome all the enemy and be their on-earth king, okay? So most of them didn't, but the elect, that remnant, those chosen ones who God knew would receive him, they did find him. They did find it. So the rest were hardened. They're hardened. You know, if we keep rejecting and rejecting and rejecting, we become hard to it. We won't receive it. So here's what it was written. God gave them a spirit of stupor. Stupor, ooh, kind of like being drunk, not thinking, not steady. He gave them a spirit of stupor, not awake. Eyes that cannot see and ears that cannot hear to this day. Verse 9. And David says, also from the Old Testament, David says, let their feasting become a snare and a trap, a pitfall and a retribution to them, something that fights against them. Let their eyes be darkened so they cannot see, and their backs be bent continually. So David was saying, hey, let all their partying, their feasting, their celebrations become a trap to them. David didn't want them to have victory. Let it be a pitfall, a retribution to them, something that draws them down to defeat. Let their eyes be darkened so they don't see and they can't see or understand. And let their backs be bent continually. David prayed that those who rejected Christ would have difficulty and not be able to see. God has a plan. Had God totally rejected Israel? No. And there's a remnant who did receive him. But we're going to read more as we go forward in chapter 11 about Israel's rejection not being final. But that's for today. That is in Romans chapter 11, verses 1 through 10. Read it. Believe it.